An Ontario court has struck down Bill 124, the controversial law that limited wages for public sector workers. The ruling now opens the door for workers' unions to take the province to court for back pay. Bill 124 was passed in 2019 and capped wage increases to 1% a year. The province had argued the law did not breach constitutional rights, but an Ontario Superior Court justice disagreed, ruling it infringes on rights to freedom of association and collective bargaining. While the Ford government says it is reviewing the decision and plans to appeal, the opposition at Queen's Park is urging the Ford government not to.
The courts, told us what we already knew, that, Doug Ford's Bill 124 was unconstitutional and wrong. I mean, it told a whole bunch of workers who we depend on that they didn't have the right to bargain. It was damaging to our relationship, our trust with them, and that's a problem. The government should not appeal this. It should just sit down with workers and come to a fair deal.
Reaction has been swift, with unions representing affected workers like nurses and teachers also calling on the province to respect the court's decision. Unifor has already said it will be seeking remedies for affected members. And this is a huge win for healthcare workers who had been protesting this very bill earlier today, but there is still disappointment in news from Ontario's budget watchdog. They found the Ford government spent $3.5 billion less than expected in the first half of the fiscal year across all sectors, with healthcare topping the list.
Kill that bill! Kill that bill!
Frontline healthcare workers spent their lunch break rallying outside Sunnybrook Hospital on Tuesday, sending this message to the Ford government: the crisis in hospitals is getting worse.
Respect us, protect us, and pay us.
Wait times in emergency rooms have reached record levels this year. Children's surgeries are being cancelled and pediatric ICUs are overflowing with patients. But the Ford government's health spending was $859 million less than expected in the first half of the fiscal year.
That underspending is what actually created the crisis that we have in our ERs today.
The program hit hardest in the sector was public health, the government spending $500 million less than what was earmarked, including only spending 11% of its COVID-19 response program's budget.
That seems like way short. It could be that, maybe they over allocated just because they didn't want to be caught short.
It is indefensible that public health spending was $500 million less than planned. That is money that could have been spent on a comprehensive, widespread vaccination campaign.
This is a snapshot in time. It does not take into full consideration the investments that have been made and are going to be fully realized in hospitals, school boards across the year.
The Ford government says it is making historic, record-breaking investments in healthcare.
We are making those investments in the short, medium, and long term.
But Ontario's budget watchdog says their investments are par for the course with a growing and aging population.
Historic investments, yes, you'll see that in every program all the time. But is that historic investment sufficient to cover the cost of the program? In our economic and budget outlook, we said no.
Kill that bill! Kill that bill! Kill that bill!
Frontline workers say hospitals can't attract or retain staff with current wages and had been demanding the government repeal Bill 124.
This Bill 124 capping our wages has completely disintegrated the system. Nurses and other healthcare workers are leaving because of it.
Under this government's watch, healthcare workers are overburdened. They're struggling.
And to another discussion dominating Queen's Park today, the Ford government is facing calls to be investigated over its controversial changes to the Greenbelt.
There's been so many media reports raising significant questions about the fact that a handful of land speculators are literally going to turn millions into billions. Over half the parcels of land being open for development in the Greenbelt were purchased after Premier Ford was elected, and some of those parcels of land were purchased as recently as September of this year. So I think we need to clear the air on this, and I believe the people of Ontario have a right to know.
Green Party leader Mike Schreiner wants the Integrity Commissioner to investigate whether developers were given advance notice of the Ford government's plan to open up parts of the Greenbelt for housing, and whether the Premier and Housing Minister Steve Clark broke any ethics rules. Schreiner filed the complaint yesterday. Clark says as housing minister, he often meets with developers and followed the necessary processes.